Hi guys, have you ever wondered what a samurai did the day after battle, when the adrenaline wore off and all that was left was dented metal and the smell of sweat-soaked silk? Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them, thinking, wait, people in New York listen to history stories to sleep. Okay, tonight we're talking about how samurai repaired their armour with lacquer and patience. But before we go anywhere, get cosy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. You're standing in a workshop somewhere in rural Japan, maybe the 1580s, maybe earlier. The year doesn't matter as much as the feeling. It's late afternoon. The light coming through the paper screens is soft and amber, the kind that makes dust particles look like they're floating through honey. Outside, cicadas are screaming their heads off, which is what cicadas do in summer when they're trying to impress each other, or whatever cicadas are into. Inside, it smells like wood shavings, old fabric, and something vaguely chemical that you can't quite place yet. That's the lacquer. You'll get used to it. You're watching a man kneel on a woven mat, his back straight, his hands moving slowly over a piece of armour that looks like it's been through hell. And it has. This is do, a chest plate, part of a full suit of samurai armour. It's made of small iron or leather scales laced together with silk cord, and right now it's a mess. Some of the cords are frayed, a few scales are cracked. There's a dent near the left shoulder that suggests someone swung a weapon with a lot of commitment and not much accuracy. The man doesn't seem bothered by any of this. He's seen worse. His name doesn't matter. Let's call him Jiro. He's not a samurai himself, not in the fighting sense. He's an armourer, a craftsman, someone who spends his days fixing the things that keep warriors alive. He's good at it. Very good. He's been doing this since he was a boy, learning from his father, who learned from his father, and so on, back through generations of people who understood that armour wasn't just protection, it was a conversation between the wearer and the world. Every dent told a story, every repair was a response. Jiro picks up a small brush, the bristles barely thicker than a few strands of hair, and dips it into a shallow dish of black lacquer. The lacquer is thick, glossy, and moves like syrup when he tilts the dish. It's made from the sap of the Urushi tree, which grows in certain parts of Japan and has been used for thousands of years to coat everything from bowls to buildings. The sap itself is toxic when it's fresh. Touch it and your skin will blister and itch for days. But once it's processed, once it's been refined and mixed with pigments and oils, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes armour for the armour. He starts with the cracked scale, brushing a thin layer of lacquer over the fracture. His hand is steady. He's done this 10,000 times, maybe more. The lacquer fills the crack, seals it, becomes part of the scale itself. It won't make the scale invincible, but it'll make it whole again, and sometimes that's enough. You watch him work and you realise there's no hurry here, no rush. The lacquer needs time to dry, and Jiro knows this, so he works slowly, methodically, one scale at a time, one cord at a time, letting each layer cure before moving on to the next. The thing about lacquer is that it's patient. It doesn't care if you're in a hurry. It dries when it's ready, not before. And Jiro respects that. He's learned to work within its rhythm, to let the material dictate the pace. It's almost meditative the way he moves. Dip the brush, apply the lacquer, wait, repeat. There's a kind of music to it, a slow, steady beat that matches the sound of the cicadas outside and the soft rustle of the paper screens when the wind picks up. You notice his hands, they're calloused, stained with years of lacquer and dye, the fingernails trimmed short and practical. These are hands that have touched thousands of pieces of armour, each one carrying the sweat and fear and hope of the person who wore it. Jiro doesn't think about that too much. He can't, really. If he stopped to consider the weight of every repair, the life depending on every stitch and every layer of lacquer, he'd probably go a little mad. So instead he focuses on the work, the immediate, tangible, solvable problems in front of him. This cord needs replacing, this scale needs reinforcing, this dent needs smoothing. One task at a time, one breath at a time, until the armour is whole again. Outside, the light is starting to fade. The cicadas are quieter now, winding down their daily symphony. Jiro lights a small oil lamp and continues working. There's no deadline, not really. The samurai who owns this armour won't need it again until the next campaign, and that could be weeks or months away. But Jiro works as if time matters, because to him it does. Every repair is a promise. Every layer of lacquer is a commitment. He's not just fixing armour, he's preserving something older and more fragile than metal. He's preserving trust. The samurai who owns this armour is named Takeda Hiroaki, and right now he's about 6 miles away, sitting in a bathhouse trying to scrub the smell of battle out of his skin. He's been soaking for an hour, maybe longer, watching the steam rise off the water and thinking about absolutely nothing, which is harder than it sounds. His body aches in places he didn't know could ache. There's a bruise on his ribs where someone's spear got a little too close for comfort. His shoulder feels like someone replaced the joint with broken pottery. He's 32 years old and he feels about 70. He's thinking about his armour, though he'd never admit it out loud. Warriors aren't supposed to worry about equipment. They're supposed to trust their armourers the way they trust their swords and their horses and the men standing beside them in formation. But Hiroaki can't help it. That armour has kept him alive through 4 major battles and countless skirmishes. He knows every scale, every chord, every place where the lacquer has worn thin from use. When he handed it over to Jiro 3 days ago, he felt like he was leaving part of himself behind, which is ridiculous, obviously. It's just metal and leather and silk. But still, the bathhouse is quiet except for the sound of water dripping somewhere in the corner and the occasional cough from another bather across the room. Hiroaki closes his eyes and lets himself sink lower into the water until it reaches his chin. He thinks about the last battle, the way his unit held the left flank while the enemy tried to punch through with cavalry. He remembers the sound of hooves on packed earth, the way his heart hammered against his ribs, the split-second decision to step forward instead of back when a rider came at him with a spear. His armour took the impact. The spear glanced off the shoulder plate, skittered across the chest, left a dent but didn't penetrate. He's alive because of those scales, that lacquer, that careful construction. He's alive because someone like Jiro spent hours, days, maybe weeks making sure every piece fit together perfectly. He thinks about this and then he stops thinking about it, because thinking too much about survival makes you hesitant, and hesitant warriors don't last long. Instead he focuses on the warmth of the water, the ache in his muscles slowly loosening, the steam filling his lungs with clean hot air. Somewhere in the back of his mind he knows his armour is in good hands. Jiro has been his family's armourer for 15 years. The man's a perfectionist, maybe even a little obsessive about his work, which is exactly what you want in someone responsible for keeping you alive. Hiroaki trusts him completely. He has to. Back in the workshop, Jiro has moved on to the cords. The silk lacing that holds the scales together is called urushi, and it's one of the most important parts of the armour, even though most people don't think about it. The scales get all the attention because they're dramatic. They're the obvious armour part, the thing that deflects blows and looks intimidating. But the cords do the real work. They hold everything together. They allow the armour to flex and move with the body. They distribute impact across multiple scales instead of concentrating it in one spot. Without good cords, you just have a pile of fancy metal pieces that don't do anything useful. These particular cords are red, or they were red back when the armour was new. Now they're more of a faded rust colour with dark stains that could be mud or blood or both. Several of them are frayed badly enough that they need replacing. One has actually snapped, leaving a gap in the lacing pattern that makes Jiro wince every time he looks at it. He's seen armour fail because of broken cords. He's seen warriors die because they trusted repairs that weren't thorough enough. So he's thorough, obsessively so. He reaches for his cord box, a wooden container divided into small compartments, each one filled with silk cords in different colours and thicknesses. He selects a new red cord, testing its strength between his hands, pulling it taut and examining it in the lamplight. Satisfied, he begins the slow process of removing the old cord and threading the new one through the tiny holes in the scales. It's tedious work. Each cord has to pass through multiple scales, following a specific pattern that's been refined over centuries. The pattern isn't just decorative, though it is beautiful in a mathematical sort of way. It's functional. It creates a kind of woven structure that distributes stress and allows the armour to move naturally. Threading the cord requires a special needle, flat and slightly curved, made from bone or sometimes steel. Jiro holds it between his thumb and forefinger, guiding it through the holes with the kind of precision that comes from muscle memory so deep it's basically instinct. Push through, pull tight, loop around, push through again. The rhythm is hypnotic. You watch his hands move and it's almost like watching someone weave or sew, which in a way is exactly what he's doing. He's sewing together a garment made of metal, creating something that's both flexible and strong, beautiful and deadly. The room is getting darker now. The oil lamp casts long shadows across the walls, making Jiro's hands look larger than they are, turning his movements into a kind of shadow puppet show. Outside, the cicadas have finally gone quiet. In their place you can hear crickets starting their night shift, a softer, more rhythmic sound that seems to match the pace of Jiro's work. He doesn't notice. He's entirely focused on the cord in his hands, the needle pushing through leather and silk, the slight resistance and then the give as it passes through, one hole at a time, one scale at a time, patience layered on patience until the work is done. There's a specific kind of tiredness that comes from doing detailed work for hours without a break, and Jiro is familiar with it. It's not the exhaustion of physical labour, not the bone-deep weariness that comes from hauling stones or working in the fields. It's more subtle than that. It's a tiredness behind the eyes, a slight tremor in the fingers that you have to compensate for, awareness that your focus is starting to fray around the edges. He knows when to stop. His father taught him that. Work too long and you make mistakes, and someone dies. So when he feels that tremor in his hands getting worse, when the lamplight starts to blur and swim a little, he sets down the needle and stretches. His back cracks in 3 places. He's been kneeling for probably 4 hours, maybe 5, and his knees are screaming about it. He's 43 years old, which isn't ancient, but isn't young either, especially not for someone who spends most of his life folded up on the floor working on tiny details. He stands slowly, carefully, feeling each vertebra adjust and settle. The workshop seems smaller when he's standing. The ceiling is low, the beams dark with age and smoke from years of lamp oil. The walls are lined with shelves holding tools and materials, brushes of every size, bottles of lacquer in different colours, boxes of cords and scales and metal fittings, rolls of leather and silk, everything organised with the kind of precision that suggests a mind that can't tolerate chaos. He walks to the door and slides it open, stepping out into the small courtyard behind the workshop. The night air hits him like cold water, shocking and refreshing after hours in the stuffy workshop. He breathes deep, filling his lungs, feeling the tightness in his chest ease a little. Above him the sky is absolutely dense with stars, the kind of star-filled sky you only get in places far from cities, where the darkness is complete and the universe shows off. He stares up at them for a moment, not thinking about anything in particular, just letting his eyes adjust and his mind wander. There's a well in the corner of the courtyard. He walks over to it, pulls up a bucket of water, and splashes his face. The water is cold enough to make him gasp, which is exactly what he needs. He drinks from his cupped hands, then splashes his face again for good measure. The water runs down his neck and soaks into his collar, and he doesn't care. He feels more awake now, more present. The tremor in his hands has stopped. His eyes feel clearer. He could keep working if he wanted to, but he won't. There's no point in pushing when your body is telling you to stop. The armour will still be there tomorrow. It's not going anywhere. He goes back inside, banks the lamp so it's just barely glowing, enough to keep from tripping over things in the dark, but not enough to waste oil. He covers Hiroaki's armour with a clean cloth to keep dust off it, even though there's barely any dust in here because he sweeps twice a day like a person with a disorder. Then he walks through the back of the workshop to his living quarters, which consist of one small room with a sleeping mat, a low table, and a cabinet containing his clothes and personal items. It's not much, but it's his, and after a day of working on someone else's survival gear, having a space that's entirely his own feels like a luxury. Sleep doesn't come immediately, which is normal. Jiro's mind is still caught in the rhythm of the work, still seeing the pattern of the cords, still feeling the resistance of the needle pushing through leather. He lies on his mat staring at the ceiling, watching the faint shadows move as a breeze shifts the trees outside. He thinks about tomorrow's work. He'll need to address the dent in the shoulder plate, which means heating the metal carefully and working it back into shape from the inside. Then he'll need to apply fresh lacquer to the entire chest piece, building up multiple layers until the surface is smooth and glossy again. That alone will take 2 days, maybe 3, because each layer needs to dry completely before the next one goes on. He thinks about Hiroaki, wonders if the samurai is sleeping better than he is. Probably not. Warriors never sleep well after battles, or at least that's what Jiro has observed over the years. They come to him with their damaged armour and he can see it in their faces, the way they're still half living in whatever hell they just survived. The ones who talk too much, filling the silence with jokes and stories that aren't as funny as they think they are. The ones who don't talk at all, who just hand over their armour and leave without making eye contact. Hiroaki is somewhere in between. He talks when he needs to, stays quiet when he doesn't, treats Jiro with the kind of respect that suggests he understands how much his life depends on good craftsmanship. There's a relationship between a warrior and an armourer that nobody talks about much, probably because it's hard to put into words. It's not friendship exactly, though it can be. It's not servitude, though technically Jiro works for Hiroaki's family. It's something else. It's trust layered on top of mutual dependency wrapped in professional respect. Hiroaki trusts Jiro to keep him alive. Jiro trusts Hiroaki to not get himself killed doing something stupid, because every time a warrior dies wearing armour Jiro made or repaired, there's a small voice in the back of his mind, asking if he missed something, if there was a weak point he should have reinforced, if he could have done better. He pushes the thought away. You can't think like that. You can't let every death become your responsibility or you'll go insane. He's told himself this 100 times, 1,000 times. It doesn't always help, but tonight it does. Tonight he's just tired enough that his brain finally decides to stop spinning and let him rest. His breathing slows, his muscles relax, the shadows on the ceiling blur and fade. Somewhere in the distance a dog barks once, twice, then stops. The crickets continue their endless song, and Jiro sleeps, dreamlessly. until the first light of dawn starts creeping through the gaps in the shutters and it's time to start again. Morning comes slowly in rural Japan during summer. The sun rises, but the air stays cool for a little while, holding on to the memory of night before the heat comes crashing back. Jiro wakes before the sun is fully up, which is habit more than choice. He's been waking at this hour since he was 12 years old. His body knows the rhythm. He sits up, stretches, feels his back protest and then settle. He splashes water on his face from a basin he filled the night before. The water is room temperature now, which means it's actually pleasant. He drinks some, then uses the rest to rinse his hands and arms.
My breakfast is simple.
Because breakfast is always simple. Rice left over from last night, reheated over a small charcoal brazier until it's warm enough to not be depressing. A few pickled vegetables from a jar that's been sitting in his cabinet for weeks. Some miso soup made from paste and hot water, the kind of meal that's more about function than pleasure. He eats slowly, methodically, staring at nothing in particular. His mind is already in the workshop, already planning the day's work. The dent in the shoulder plate, the layers of lacquer, the inspection of every cord and scale to make sure he hasn't missed anything. There's always something to miss. That's the thing about armour. It's a collection of hundreds of small parts, and any one of them could be the weak point that gets someone killed. He finishes eating, rinses his bowl and chopsticks, sets them on a wooden rack to dry. Then he walks back into the workshop, slides the door open, and lets the morning light flood in. The armour is exactly where he left it, still covered with the cloth. He removes the cloth carefully, folding it with more precision than is probably necessary, and sets it aside. Then he kneels beside the armour and just looks at it for a moment. This is part of his process. Before he touches anything, before he picks up a tool or opens a jar of lacquer, he looks. He studies. He lets his eyes trace the patterns of the scales, the roots of the cords, the places where the metal has worn thin or the lacquer has chipped away. Every piece of armour has a personality, if you know how to look for it. This one is old, maybe 30 years, which is ancient for armour that sees regular use. It's been repaired many times. He can see the evidence in the layered lacquer, the replaced scales, the cords that don't quite match the original colour scheme. Some armourers would look at this and suggest building a new suit entirely, start fresh, use better materials, create something that fits Hiroaki's body perfectly instead of trying to maintain something that's been passed down through his family. But Jiro understands why Hiroaki keeps using this armour. It's not about the materials, it's about continuity. This armour was his father's before it was his, maybe his grandfather's before that. Every dent, every repair, every worn spot is a connection to those men, a physical link to their courage and their survival. So Jiro doesn't suggest replacing it, he just makes it whole again as best he can, with the understanding that wholeness is temporary and repairs are a conversation with entropy that you're eventually going to lose, but not today. Today he's going to win. Today he's going to take this dented, frayed, battle-worn piece of equipment and turn it back into something that can save a life. He starts with the shoulder plate, the one with the significant dent. The plate is made of iron, several small scales riveted to a leather backing. The dent is deep enough that it's distorted the shape of two scales, pushing them inwards so they no longer sit flush with the ones around them. If Hiroaki wore this armour as is, that dent would create a weak point. A spear or sword could catch in the depression and penetrate more easily than it should, so the dent has to go. Removing a dent from armour is not like removing a dent from a modern car, where you can just pop it out from behind or use some kind of suction device. This is hand-forged iron, riveted to leather, laced with silk cords. You can't just hammer on it from the outside because you'll damage the lacquer and potentially crack the scales. You have to work from the inside, carefully, patiently, with heat and pressure applied in exactly the right amounts. Too much heat and you'll weaken the metal. Too much pressure and you'll crack it. Not enough of either, and nothing happens at all. Jiro has a small forge in the corner of the workshop, basically a clay-lined box filled with charcoal and equipped with a bellows for controlling the temperature. He lights it now, blowing gently on the coals until they start to glow red and then orange. The heat builds slowly. He's not trying to melt anything, just get the metal hot enough to become slightly more malleable. While the forge heats up, he carefully removes the damaged scales from the shoulder plate, untying the cords and extracting the rivets that hold them to the leather backing. It's delicate work. The rivets are old and the metal is thin in places. He has to use a small punch and a light hammer, tapping gently, feeling for the moment when the rivet gives way without destroying the hole it's passing through. The scales come free one at a time. He sets them on his workbench, arranging them in order so he'll remember how they fit together. Then he takes the most damaged one, the one with the deepest part of the dent, and examines it closely in the morning light. The iron is dark with age and use, coated with layers of old lacquer that have chipped away in places. The dent is on the outer face, about the size of his thumbnail, deep enough that you could probably fit your pinky finger into it if you tried, which would be weird but possible. He holds the scale with a pair of long tongs and places it in the edge of the forge, not directly in the hottest part but close enough to heat gradually. This is where patience becomes everything. Rush it and the scale could warp or crack. Take too long and you waste charcoal and time. He watches the metal, waiting for it to change color, to develop that faint red glow that means it's hot enough to work. It takes maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15. He doesn't count. He just watches and waits, occasionally pumping the bellows to maintain the temperature, letting his mind settle into that focused state where time stops being measured in minutes and starts being measured in readiness. When the scale is ready, he pulls it from the forge and places it on a small anvil, a solid block of steel about the size of a brick. He has a collection of small hammers hanging on the wall, each one shaped for a different purpose. He selects one with a rounded face, barely larger than a marble. Then, working quickly before the metal cools, he begins tapping on the inside of the dent, gently persuading the iron to return to its original shape. Tap, tap, tap. Small controlled strikes. He's not trying to force anything, he's suggesting. The metal responds slowly, grudgingly, the dent becoming shallower with each tap. He works in a spiral pattern, starting at the deepest part and gradually working outward, evening out the surface until it's almost flat again. The scale cools quickly once it's out of the forge, the red glow fading to black in less than a minute. Jiro examines his work, running his thumb over the surface where the dent used to be. It's not perfect. There's still a faint depression, a ghost of the original damage, but it's shallow enough now that it won't compromise the armor's integrity. He could heat it again, work it some more, chase perfection for another hour. But perfection is a myth. Good enough to keep Hiroaki alive is the actual goal, and this is good enough. He sets the scale aside and reaches for the next one. The second scale has a smaller dent, barely noticeable unless you're looking for it. Some armourers wouldn't bother. It's superficial, cosmetic really, not a structural problem. But Jiro bothers. He bothers because Hiroaki will notice, even if he doesn't say anything. Warriors know their armour intimately. They know every scratch, every repair, every imperfection. If Jiro returns the armour with an obvious dent still visible, Hiroaki won't complain, but he'll know. He'll know that Jiro took a shortcut, and that knowledge will sit between them like a small uncomfortable stone. So Jiro heats the second scale and works out the dent, even though it's tedious and probably unnecessary, because the relationship between an armourer and a warrior is built on these small acts of thoroughness, these moments when you do the work even though nobody would fault you for skipping it. By the time he's finished with both scales, the morning is well advanced, the workshop is warming up, the cool dawn air has been replaced by the first hints of summer heat, that sticky oppressive warmth that makes you sweat just from sitting still. Jiro wipes his forehead with his sleeve and takes a drink from a water jar he keeps near the workbench. The water is lukewarm and tastes faintly of clay, but it's wet and that's what matters. He pours a little over his hands, rubbing them together to wash away the charcoal dust and metal residue. His fingertips are slightly burned from holding the tongs too close to the forge. He barely notices. His hands are always a little burned or cut or stained. It's just part of the condition of having hands that do this kind of work. He returns to the scales, laying them out on the workbench and examining them one more time in the full daylight. Satisfied, he begins the process of reattaching them to the leather backing. This requires new rivets, which he makes himself from small pieces of iron wire. He cuts the wire to length, hammers one end flat to create a head, then threads it through the holes in the scale and the leather. On the back side, he hammers the other end flat, creating a second head that locks everything together. It's simple in concept, but requires precision in execution. The rivets need to be tight enough to hold, but not so tight that they distort the leather or crack the scale. He works slowly, testing each rivet with his fingers, feeling for the right amount of tension. The silk cords come next, lacing the scales together in the traditional pattern. Red cords through the holes, following the path he knows by heart. Over and under, through and around, creating that woven structure that looks decorative but is actually load-bearing. His fingers move automatically now, no longer needing to think about which hole comes next or how tight to pull the cord. It's muscle memory, years of repetition compressed into movements that feel more like breathing than conscious action. The morning light shifts as he works, moving across the floor of the workshop, marking time in the slow, patient way that sunlight does when you're too focused to notice it passing. There's a sound outside, footsteps on the path leading to the workshop. Jiro doesn't look up immediately. He's in the middle of a tricky bit of lacing where the cords from 3 different scales intersect, and if he loses his place he'll have to start over. So he finishes the knot, pulls it tight, checks it twice, and only then does he turn toward the door. A shadow falls across the threshold. Someone clears their throat politely, the Japanese way of announcing your presence without being obnoxiously loud about it. "Come in," Jiro says, setting down the needle and standing. His knees crack again. He's going to have the knees of an 80-year-old man by the time he's 50 at this rate. The person who enters is not Hiroaki. It's a younger man, maybe 20, dressed in simple travelling clothes that have seen better days. He's carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth, holding it carefully like it's fragile or precious or both. He bows politely, the kind of bow that suggests he's been taught proper etiquette but isn't entirely comfortable with it yet. Jiro bows back, automatically matching the depth and duration.
Master Jiro,
The young man says, his voice slightly uncertain.
That's me,
Jiro confirms, though he doesn't particularly like being called master. It makes him sound older and more important than he feels. What can I do for you? The young man holds out the bundle. My lord asked me to bring this to you. He said you would know what to do with it. Jiro takes the bundle, feeling the weight of it, the distinctive hardness of metal beneath the cloth. He doesn't need to unwrap it to know what it is. More armour. Of course it's more armour. It's always more armour. He sets it on the workbench and carefully unfolds the cloth. Inside is a helmet, a kabuto, and it's in rough shape. The bowl of the helmet is dented in 2 places. The decorative crest that normally sits on top is missing entirely, probably lost in battle. The lacework around the neck guard is torn and stained with something dark that could be blood or mud or both. What happened to this? Jiro asks, though he can guess. The young man shifts his weight, uncomfortable. There was a skirmish 3 days ago. My lord took a blow to the head. The helmet saved him, but... He gestures at the damage as if it needs explaining. But now the helmet needs saving, Jiro finishes. He turns the helmet over in his hands, examining it from all angles. It's good work originally. Well made, properly lacquered, the iron thick enough to provide real protection. But it's been through something violent and it shows. Tell your lord it will take a week, maybe more. I have another piece I'm working on first. The young man nods, relieved that Jiro is taking the job. Thank you, Master Jiro. My lord will be grateful. He bows again, deeper this time, then hesitates at the door. He also asked me to tell you that there's no rush. He said he trusts your timing. Jiro almost smiles at that. Tell him I appreciate the trust, and tell him to stop getting hit in the head. The young man does smile at that, a quick nervous flash of teeth, and then he's gone, his footsteps fading down the path. Jiro stands in the doorway for a moment, watching him go, then turns back to the workshop. 2 pieces now, Hiroaki's chest plate and this helmet. Both need attention, both are keeping someone alive. He looks at the helmet, at the dents and the torn lacework, and feels that familiar weight settle onto his shoulders. Not quite anxiety, not quite responsibility, something in between. The knowledge that his work matters in ways that most work doesn't, that the difference between a careful repair and a sloppy one could be measured in heartbeats and last breaths. He sets the helmet aside for now. Hiroaki's armour comes first, because Hiroaki brought his in first, and because there's a kind of honour in finishing what you start before moving on to the next thing. He returns to the chest plate, to the scales that still need lacing, to the patterns his fingers know by heart. The helmet can wait. It's patient. It has to be. Metal doesn't care about time the way people do. It just sits there, dented and damaged, until someone with the right tools and the right knowledge decides to make it whole again. The morning slides into afternoon. The heat builds until the workshop feels like the inside of a kiln. Jiro strips down to just his undergarment, his chest and arms slick with sweat. But he doesn't stop working. Stopping would mean starting again later, and starting again means losing the rhythm, the flow state where his hands know what to do without his brain having to tell them. So he pushes through, taking small breaks to drink water and wipe the sweat from his eyes, but mostly just working. Lacing cords, checking knots, testing the flexibility of each section, making sure everything moves the way it's supposed to move, protects the way it's supposed to protect. By mid-afternoon, he's finished the lacing on the chest plate. All the scales are secure, all the cords are tight. The armour looks almost presentable now, almost like it did before battle tried to destroy it. But it's not done, not even close. The lacquer is still damaged in dozens of places, worn thin by friction and impact, chipped away by weapons and weather. The black coating that gives the armour its signature look is patchy and dull. It needs to be refinished, layer by layer, until the surface is smooth and glossy again, until it looks like something a warrior would be proud to wear into battle. Jiro gathers his lacquer supplies, multiple jars of black lacquer, each one a slightly different consistency depending on how it will be used. Brushes ranging from thick to impossibly thin. Small dishes for mixing, cloth for wiping away mistakes. He arranges everything on the workbench in the order he'll need it, creating a kind of assembly line for beauty and function combined. Then he sits, takes a breath, and begins the slow, meticulous process of applying the first layer. Lacquer is unforgiving. That's the first thing you learn when you start working with it. You can't rush. You can't skip steps. You can't cover up mistakes with more lacquer because the mistakes will just show through, sometimes worse than before. Every layer has to be perfect, or as close to perfect as human hands can achieve, because each layer builds on the one beneath it. If the foundation is flawed, everything above it is flawed. It's a metaphor for something, probably, but Jiro is too focused on the actual work to think about metaphors. He starts with the areas where the old lacquer has been completely worn away, exposing the bare metal or leather underneath. These spots need a base layer, a primer essentially, that will help the subsequent layers adhere properly. He uses a thicker lacquer for this, almost paste-like, applying it with a medium-sized brush in smooth, even strokes. The lacquer goes on milky and semi-transparent, but it will dry to a hard, glossy black, assuming he doesn't mess it up, assuming the humidity is right and the temperature is right and he doesn't sneeze or twitch at the wrong moment. The problem with lacquer, beyond it being toxic and unforgiving and slow to dry, is that it requires absolute steadiness. Your hand can't shake. You can't hesitate mid-stroke or you'll leave a mark. You have to commit to each movement completely, trusting that your hand knows where to go. Jiro's been doing this long enough that he mostly doesn't think about it. His hand just moves. The brush just glides across the surface, leaving behind a thin film of lacquer that catches the light and looks wet and alive. He works his way across the chest plate systematically, covering each worn spot, each scratch, each place where the armour has been damaged by use. It takes concentration, the kind of concentration where the rest of the world fades away and there's only the brush and the lacquer and the surface you're working on. Time stops being linear. You enter a state where you might have been working for 10 minutes or 2 hours and you genuinely can't tell the difference. Your back might be aching, your neck might be stiff, your eyes might be burning from the lacquer fumes, but you don't notice until you stop, and you're not stopping yet. Outside, the afternoon is at its peak. The cicadas are screaming again, that overwhelming wall of sound that somehow becomes background noise when you're used to it. The heat is oppressive, the kind that makes you understand why people in this era take long midday breaks, retreating to cool, dark places until the worst of it passes. But Jiro doesn't retreat, he just keeps working. Brush in hand, adding layer after careful layer to metal and leather that has already survived more than most people ever will. The lacquer smells sharp and chemical, a scent that makes your sinuses clear and your eyes water if you're not used to it. Jiro barely notices anymore. It's just the smell of work, the smell of things being made whole. There's a certain point in the afternoon where the heat peaks and then, almost imperceptibly, begins to decline. Not by much, not in any way that would make you significantly more comfortable, but there's a shift in the quality of the light, a slight change in the angle of the sun through the paper screens that suggests the day is beginning its slow descent toward evening. Jiro notices this the way you might notice a familiar song playing in another room, not consciously, but somewhere in the back of his awareness. His body knows what time it is even if his mind is elsewhere. He's finished the base layer on the chest plate. Now comes the waiting. Lacquer needs time to cure, to transform from that wet, glossy state into something hard and permanent. Depending on the humidity and temperature, this could take anywhere from a few hours to overnight. You can't rush it. If you apply the next layer too soon, you'll disturb the one beneath it, creating bubbles and imperfections that will haunt you forever. So you wait. You clean your brushes. You organize your workspace. You start on something else, which in this case means turning his attention to the helmet that arrived this morning. He picks it up from where he set it earlier, feeling the weight of it in his hands. Helmets are complicated pieces of equipment. They're not just bowls of metal strapped to your head. They're engineering solutions to a very specific problem. How do you protect someone's skull from being crushed, cut, or punctured while still allowing them to see, hear, breathe, and move their head freely enough to actually fight? The answer, developed over centuries of trial and error and battlefield feedback, is a complex assembly of iron plates, leather padding, silk cords, and decorative elements that somehow manage to be both functional and beautiful. This particular helmet is what's called a Zunari Kabuto, a relatively simple design compared to some of the more elaborate styles. The bowl is made of several iron plates riveted together, forming a smooth dome shape that's designed to deflect blows rather than absorb them directly. Around the base of the bowl is a neck guard, a series of horizontal plates laced together with silk cord that protect the back and sides of the neck while allowing the head to move. Or, it's supposed to be a series of plates laced together. Right now, several of the cords are broken and one of the plates is hanging loose, barely attached at all. Jiro sets the helmet on his workbench and begins the assessment. The bowl has two significant dents, both on the right side, which suggests the wearer was attacked from that direction and probably didn't see it coming, or couldn't block it in time. The dents are deep enough to be concerning. If the helmet is worn again without repair, those dents could actually channel a weapon's force inward rather than deflecting it away, which would defeat the entire purpose of wearing a helmet in the first place. So the dents have to be removed, just like the ones on Hiroaki's shoulder plate. Heat and patience and careful hammering until the metal remembers its original shape. But first, the neck guard. The broken cords need to be replaced before he can work on the bowl, because he'll need to handle the helmet extensively during the dent removal process, and if the neck guard is barely attached, it'll just get more damaged. So he begins the familiar process of removing old cord and threading new cord, his fingers following patterns he could probably do blindfolded at this point. The silk slides through the small holes in the metal plates, creating that distinctive soft whisper of fibre against iron. It's almost musical if you listen right. The afternoon light continues its slow fade toward evening. Jiro works on the neck guard with the same methodical patience he brings to everything, replacing each broken cord one at a time, testing the tension, making sure the plates hang correctly. The neck guard needs to be flexible enough to move with the head but tight enough to stay in position during combat. It's a balance. Too loose, and it flaps around uselessly. Too tight, and it restricts movement, makes the wearer turn their entire body when they need to look to the side, which is a good way to get killed by something you didn't see coming. He thinks about the warrior who wore this helmet, the one who took those dents to the head. The young messenger said the helmet saved him, which means the alternative was death or severe injury. The warrior is alive right now because someone, maybe Jiro himself, made this helmet well enough to absorb impacts that should have split his skull. That's a strange thing to think about. Your work quite literally keeping people's brains inside their heads where they belong. Most craftsmen don't get that kind of immediate feedback on whether they did a good job or not. A carpenter might never know if the house he built shelters a family well. A potter might never know if his bowls bring someone joy during meals. But an armourer? An armourer gets very direct feedback. Either the person wearing your work survives, or they don't. Jiro tries not to think about the ones who didn't. It's not productive. You can't carry that weight around or you'll collapse under it. But sometimes, late at night when sleep won't come, he thinks about the pieces of armour that came back without their owners. The chest plates with holes punched through them, the helmets that weren't quite strong enough, the repairs that should have been done better, faster, with more attention to detail. He thinks about these things and then pushes them away, because dwelling on failure doesn't help anyone. The living need armour, the dead are beyond his help. The last cord slides into place. He ties it off with a specific knot that will hold under stress but can be untied if needed for future repairs. Then he tests the neck guard, flexing it gently, checking the range of motion. Satisfied, he sets the helmet down and stands up to stretch. His back protests, his knees protest, his neck protests. Apparently his entire skeletal system is filing complaints about the management decisions being made by his brain. He ignores the complaints and walks to the door, stepping out into the courtyard again for some air. The evening is coming on properly now. The sun is lower, the shadows longer, the heat finally beginning to break. There's a breeze, slight but present, carrying with it the smell of cooking rice from somewhere nearby. Someone's making dinner. Jiro realizes he hasn't eaten since breakfast, which explains the slight hollow feeling in his stomach and the faint headache beginning to build behind his eyes. He should eat something. He should probably stop working for the day, let his body rest, come back to everything tomorrow with fresh eyes and steadier hands. But he won't. Not yet. There's more to do. There's always more to do. He goes back inside and lights another lamp as the natural light continues to fade. The workshop takes on a different quality in lamplight, warmer somehow, more intimate. The shadows are deeper, the edges softer. It's easier to focus when the world outside disappears into darkness and there's only the small circle of light around your workspace. Jiro returns to the helmet, turning it slowly in his hands, examining the dents in the bowl. They're both on the same side, roughly the same size, which suggests two impacts from the same weapon or the same type of weapon. A war club, maybe, or the blunt edge of a sword used in a desperate moment when there wasn't time for proper technique. The dents will need heat, just like the scales from Hiroaki's armour. But helmet bowls are trickier than individual scales. They're larger, more curved, and removing a dent from one area can sometimes create stress fractures in another. You have to heat the metal evenly, work it carefully, support it properly so it doesn't warp. Jiro has cracked helmet bowls before, early in his training, when he was too aggressive or too impatient. Each crack taught him something. Each failure made him better at not failing. That's how you learn things that matter, through mistakes that actually cost something. He prepares the forge again, building up the coals, working the bellows until the temperature is right. While it heats, he examines the inside of the helmet bowl, looking for the best place to apply pressure during the repair. There's padding inside, cloth wrapped around thin strips of bamboo, designed to cushion the head and absorb impact. Some of the padding is torn from the force of the blows. He'll need to replace that too eventually, but first the metal. Structure before comfort, function before aesthetics. That's the hierarchy of armor repair. When the forge is ready, he uses his longest pair of tongs to hold the helmet at an angle over the coals, heating the area around the first dent. This takes longer than heating a single scale. The metal is thicker, and there's more of it. He has to be patient, rotating the helmet slowly, making sure the heat spreads evenly across the surface. The iron begins to glow, that deep red color that means it's hot enough to work but not so hot that it's weakened. He watches carefully. Too much heat and the rivets holding the plates together could fail. Not enough, and the dent won't move. He pulls the helmet from the forge and places it on his anvil, bowl side up. Then, working quickly because the metal is already beginning to cool, he selects a wooden mallet, something softer than steel that won't mark or damage the surface. He reaches inside the helmet, bracing his hand against the interior, and begins tapping on the dent from the outside with the mallet. Gentle taps at first, testing the metal's responsiveness. The dent resists, holding its shape stubbornly. He taps harder. The metal moves slightly, grudgingly. A little more heat would help, but he doesn't want to risk overheating. So he works with what he has, tapping and bracing, feeling the dents slowly, incrementally begin to give way. The process is hypnotic in its repetition. Tap, brace, tap, brace. Check the progress. Apply more pressure where needed. Work around the edges of the dent, persuading the metal to return to its original curve. The helmet bowl is cool enough now that the red glow has faded completely, but the metal retains enough heat to remain workable. Jiro's hand inside the bowl is uncomfortably warm, not quite burning but close enough that he'll probably have another set of heat marks on his fingers by tomorrow. He doesn't stop. You don't stop in the middle of shaping hot metal just because your hand is uncomfortable. You finish the work and deal with your hand later. The first dent is almost gone. There's still a slight depression, a faint irregularity in the curve that only someone who knows exactly what to look for would notice. But it's good enough. The structural integrity is restored. The helmet will deflect blows properly again instead of channeling them inward. He sets the mallet down and examines his work, running his fingers over the inside and outside of the bowl. The metal is still warm to the touch. He can feel the ghost of the dent, the memory of violence embedded in iron, but the worst of it is gone. The second dent is larger and deeper. This one is going to require more heat and more patience. He returns the helmet to the forge, positioning it so the second dent is directly over the coals. The weighting is harder this time because his hand is already sore and he knows what's coming. More heat, more bracing, more tapping with the mallet while the metal burns his fingers and his shoulders ache from holding awkward angles. But this is the work. This is what keeping people alive looks like in practical terms. It looks like burned fingers and aching joints and hours spent coaxing metal back into shapes that will turn aside weapons. While the helmet heats, Jiro drinks some water and eats a handful of dried fish from a jar he keeps for these long working sessions. The fish is oversalted and tough, more like leather than food, but it's protein, and it gives his jaw something to do while his mind processes the work ahead. He thinks about the warrior who will wear this helmet again, assuming Jiro does his job properly. That warrior will probably never know exactly how close these dents came to being fatal. He'll know the helmet saved him, obviously. But he won't know about these hours in a workshop, the careful heating and hammering, the patience required to restore something that's been broken by violence. The helmet is glowing again. Jiro pulls it from the forge and returns it to the anvil. This time when he begins tapping with the mallet, the dent resists more strongly. The metal has been work-hardened by the original impact, made more brittle and less willing to move. He works slowly, methodically, increasing the force of each tap gradually rather than trying to force the issue all at once. The metal begins to respond. Slowly, grudgingly, the dent starts to shallow out. His hand inside the bowl is definitely burning now, past uncomfortable into actual pain, but he's committed. Stopping now would mean reheating everything and starting over. So he pushes through, tap after tap, until the dent is shallow enough to not be a structural concern. When he finally pulls his hand out of the helmet, the palm is bright red and already starting to blister in one spot. He walks to the water bucket and plunges his hand in, hissing through his teeth at the shock of cold against burned skin. The relief is immediate and intense. He holds his hand underwater for a long moment, feeling the heat leach out into the water, the pain dulling from sharp to merely present. This is normal. This is expected. You don't work with hot metal for 25 years without accumulating burns. His hands are a map of his profession, scarred and calloused, and marked by all the times he miscalculated, or got careless, or just accepted pain as the price of getting the job done. He dries his hand on a cloth and examines the blister. It's small, maybe the size of a grain of rice, right in the center of his palm. It'll hurt for a few days, and then it'll heal and join all the other faint scars that pattern his skin. He wraps the hand loosely with a strip of clean cloth, just enough to keep the blister from breaking and getting infected, then returns to the helmet. The 2 dents are handled. Not perfect, but functional. The bowl will protect its wearer properly again. Now it's a matter of aesthetics and finish work. The entire surface of the helmet bowl is covered in old lacquer that's been scratched, chipped, and worn thin by use. Like Hiroaki's chest plate, it needs to be refinished, built back up in layers until it's smooth and glossy, and looks like something worth wearing. But that will have to wait until tomorrow. The lacquer on the chest plate is still curing, and he can't work on both pieces simultaneously. More importantly, his hand is burned and his body is exhausted, and if he tries to do detail work in this condition, he'll make mistakes. So he makes the decision to stop for the night, even though part of his mind is already racing ahead to tomorrow's tasks. He banks the forge, covering the coals with ash to starve them of oxygen so they'll die down slowly rather than burning all night and wasting fuel. He cleans his tools, wiping down the hammers and tongs, rinsing the brushes he used for lacquer earlier. Everything gets put back in its proper place. This is as much a part of the work as the actual repairs. A disorganized workshop leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to flawed armor. Flawed armor leads to death. So you stay organized even when you're tired, even when every part of you wants to just drop everything and collapse onto your sleeping mat. The night outside is full dark now. Somewhere in the distance a temple bell rings, marking the hour, though Jiro has long since stopped tracking time by bells or sun position. His body tells him when it's time to work and when it's time to stop, and right now his body is making a very compelling argument for stopping. He takes one last look around the workshop, making sure nothing is out of place, nothing that could be a fire hazard or trip him in the morning when he comes back in. Then he walks to his sleeping quarters, strips off his work clothes which are stiff with dried sweat, and lies down on his mat without bothering to eat a proper dinner. Sleep comes quickly, heavily, like a hammer blow to consciousness. Dreams come too, though he won't remember most of them. Fragments of metal and fire. Patterns of silk cord that loop and twist in impossible geometries. Faces of warriors he's known over the years, some living, some dead, all of them watching him work with expressions he can't quite read. The dreams shift and blur, bleeding into each other the way dreams do, until they fade into deep dreamless sleep, the kind that actually restores you, that lets your muscles repair and your mind reset. He wakes before dawn again, habit pulling him back to consciousness even though his body would prefer another few hours. The burned hand throbs dully. He unwraps it carefully, examining the blister in the grey pre-dawn light filtering through the shutters. It's intact, which is good. He leaves it unwrapped now, letting the air get to it. Burns heal better when they can breathe. He splashes water on his face, drinks deeply from his water jar, stretches carefully until his back cracks and his shoulders loosen. This morning he does make a proper breakfast. Rice again, but fresh this time, cooked over the brazier until it's soft and steaming. Miso soup with actual vegetables in it, not just paste and water. An egg, boiled until the yolk is just set, the white firm but not rubbery. He eats slowly, sitting cross-legged on the floor of his small room, looking at nothing in particular. His mind is already in the workshop, but he forces himself to stay present, to taste the food, to feel the warmth of the tea as he drinks it. These small moments of peace are important. They're what keep you sane when your work involves preparing objects that will be used for killing and dying. When he's finished eating, he cleans his dishes and returns to the workshop. The morning light is stronger today, clearer, and when he uncovers Hiroaki's chest plate, he's pleased to see that the base layer of lacquer has cured properly. The surface is hard to the touch, no longer tacky, ready for the next layer. He prepares his materials again, the same ritual as yesterday. Lacquer jars, brushes, mixing dishes, everything arranged in precise order, because precision in preparation leads to precision in execution. The second layer goes on thinner than the first. This one is about building depth and evenness, filling in any remaining imperfections, creating a smooth foundation for the final layers. He works with a finer brush now, applying the lacquer in long, smooth strokes that follow the natural curves and lines of the armor. The technique is called nuri, which just means lacquering. But like most Japanese words for craft techniques, it implies a whole philosophy of approach. You don't just slap lacquer on metal, you consider the piece as a whole. You think about how light will move across the surface. You build up the coating gradually, patiently, letting each layer enhance the ones beneath it. The brush moves across the scales in a rhythm that matches his breathing. Stroke, breathe, stroke, breathe. The lacquer catches the morning light and gleams wet and black, like oil on water, like the surface of a deep pool at night. It's almost beautiful in this state, before it dries and becomes matte and ordinary again. But Jiro knows that when multiple layers are built up and the final polishing is done, that beauty will return, permanent and hard as stone. That's the promise of lacquer work. Patience now, beauty later. Effort now, protection later. Pain now, survival later. He works his way across the entire chest plate, covering every surface with the second layer. It takes most of the morning. His hand still throbs from yesterday's burn, but he's adapted his grip on the brush to avoid putting pressure on the blister. This is something else you learn as a craftsman. How to work around your body's protests. How to adjust technique when you're injured or tired or both. The armor doesn't care if your hand hurts. The warrior who will wear it doesn't care. They just care that it's done properly, so you find a way to make it work. By midday, the second layer is complete. Now comes more waiting. The lacquer needs time to cure again before he can apply the third layer. Jiro covers the chest plate with a clean cloth to protect it from dust and insects, then turns his attention back to the helmet. The dents are fixed, but the neck guard needs its lacquer refreshed, and the inside padding needs to be replaced. He starts with the padding because it's straightforward work that doesn't require the same level of focus as lacquering. His mind can wander a little while his hands strip out the old torn fabric and bamboo strips. The padding is important even though nobody sees it. It's the difference between a helmet that protects and a helmet that protects comfortably. A warrior needs to be able to wear his armor for hours, sometimes days, without it becoming unbearable. If the padding is wrong, the helmet shifts and slides, chafes and pinches, distracts the wearer at exactly the wrong moment. So the padding needs to be thick enough to cushion impact, but not so thick that it makes the helmet too tight. It needs to be secured properly so it doesn't bunch or migrate. It needs to be made from materials that wick sweat and don't rot or smell terrible after a few uses. Jiro uses cotton cloth for the outer layer of padding, wrapped around thin, flexible strips of bamboo that give it structure. He cuts the bamboo carefully, measuring against the interior curve of the helmet bowl, making sure each piece will fit snugly without creating pressure points. Then he wraps each bamboo strip with cotton, securing it with small stitches that he can feel more than see, his fingers working inside the helmet where his eyes can't follow. It's like surgery in a way, working by touch in confined spaces, trusting your hands to know what they're doing even when you can't see the results until you pull your arm back out. The bamboo strips get attached to the inside of the helmet bowl with small rivets and rice paste adhesive, creating a suspension system that holds the padding away from the metal. This creates an air gap, a crucial space that absorbs impact and provides ventilation. Without that gap, wearing a metal helmet in summer would be like sticking your head in an oven. With it, the experience is merely extremely uncomfortable rather than completely unbearable. It's the small considerations that make the difference between armour that warriors will actually wear and armour that gets left behind because it's too miserable to use. He works slowly, testing each piece of padding as he installs it, reaching his hand inside the helmet to feel for any irregularities or sharp edges that could cause problems. His burned palm complains about this treatment, but he ignores it. The blister is still intact. He can work through the discomfort. He's worked through worse. There was a time, maybe 15 years ago, when he sliced his thumb nearly to the bone while cutting leather and just wrapped it tightly and kept working, because there was a deadline and a warrior waiting. And you don't stop for minor injuries when someone's life depends on you finishing the job. The padding installation takes the rest of the afternoon. By the time he's satisfied with it, the light is fading again and his stomach is reminding him that he skipped lunch entirely. He should probably eat more regularly. His body is not a young person's body anymore. It needs fuel and rest and maintenance, just like the armour he works on. But there's always one more thing to do, one more piece to check, one more detail to get right. That's the trap of craftsmanship. The work is never truly finished. It's just finished enough that you can let it go into the world and hope it does what it's supposed to do. He makes a simple dinner of rice and pickled vegetables and sits in his doorway watching the sun set while he eats. The sky is doing that thing it does sometimes, turning colours that don't seem quite real. Orange bleeding into pink, bleeding into purple. Clouds lit from below like they're burning. It's pretty in a way that makes you understand why people write poems about sunsets. Though most of those poems are probably written by people who have leisure time to appreciate sunsets instead of a workshop full of armour that needs repairing. A cat appears from somewhere, one of the strays that wanders the neighbourhood. It sits a respectful distance away and looks at him with that expression cats have that seems to say, "I'm not asking for anything, but if you happen to have food you weren't using, I wouldn't object." Jiro tears off a small piece of fish from his meal and tosses it in the cat's direction. The cat doesn't pounce on it desperately like a starving animal. It approaches cautiously, sniffs the fish and then eats it in small dignified bites. When it's finished, it sits and cleans its whiskers, completely ignoring Jiro now that the transaction is complete. Typical cat behaviour. Jiro respects it. The cat eventually wanders off into the gathering darkness, presumably to find other people to charm food out of, or to conduct whatever mysterious business cats conduct at night. Jiro finishes his own meal and sits for a few more minutes, enjoying the cool evening air, feeling his body slowly unwind from the day's work. His hand still throbs, his back is stiff, his knees ache when he stands, but these are familiar discomforts, almost comforting in their predictability. This is what his body feels like after a day of work. This is normal. This is fine. He goes back inside and checks on the chest plate one more time, before settling in for the night. The second layer of lacquer has begun to cure, the surface no longer wet but not yet completely hard. By morning it will be ready for the third layer, and after that the fourth, and possibly a fifth depending on how the coverage looks. Each layer makes the armour incrementally more durable, more beautiful, more complete. It's cumulative. Nothing dramatic happens with any single layer, but the sum of all the layers transforms rough damaged metal into something that looks almost new. Sleep comes easier tonight, maybe because he's more thoroughly exhausted, or maybe because the work is progressing well and some anxious part of his mind can relax knowing that everything is on schedule. His dreams are quieter too, less metal and fire, more just abstract shapes and colours drifting across his consciousness like clouds across a sky. He wakes once in the middle of the night to use the latrine and notices the moon is nearly full, bright enough to cast distinct shadows across the courtyard. He stands there for a moment, looking up at it, thinking about nothing in particular. Then he goes back to bed and sleeps until dawn pulls him back to waking. The next several days fall into a rhythm. Wake, eat, apply another layer of lacquer to the chest plate, wait for it to cure, work on some other aspect of the helmet or perform maintenance on his tools. Eat again, apply lacquer, wait, sleep. The repetition is meditative. Each day is slightly different but follows the same basic structure, the same pattern of work and rest and incremental progress. This is what armour repair actually looks like. Not dramatic transformations or sudden revelations, just patient layering of material and skill until something broken becomes whole again. By the fifth day, Hiroaki's chest plate has 6 layers of lacquer built up on it and the surface is beginning to look genuinely good. The black is deep and even, with a subtle sheen that catches the light. There are still some minor imperfections if you look closely. Small dust particles that got trapped in one layer or another, tiny bubbles that formed during curing. But overall it's approaching the level of finish that a warrior would expect from quality armour. 1 or 2 more layers and it will be done, or at least done enough. Jiro has learned over the years that done is a moving target. You could keep refining forever if you let yourself. But at some point you have to decide that good enough is actually good enough, and let the thing go out into the world. The helmet is progressing more slowly because it's more complex. The bowl is finished, the dents removed, the padding installed. But the neck guard still needs all its lacquer refreshed, and there are decorative metal fittings that need cleaning and reattaching, and a whole constellation of small tasks that each take longer than you'd think they should. Jiro works through them methodically, never rushing, never cutting corners. The warrior who will wear this helmet deserves the same care and attention as Hiroaki, even though Jiro doesn't know his name, or his face, or anything about him except that he survived 2 hard blows to the head. There's something democratic about armour repair that Jiro appreciates. Every piece that comes through his workshop gets the same treatment, the same patience, the same commitment to quality. It doesn't matter if the warrior is important or nobody, wealthy or barely scraping by, a veteran of 100 battles or a young man in his first campaign. The armour all needs the same thing: careful attention to detail and thorough repair. Jiro treats every piece like it's protecting someone he cares about, because that's the only way to do the work properly. Start making distinctions about whose life is worth more care, and you're on a path that leads nowhere good. On the 7th day, he applies the final layer of lacquer to the chest plate. This one goes on thinner than all the others, almost transparent, more of a sealant than a coating. It's meant to protect the layers beneath it and give the surface its final character. He uses his finest brush for this, barely more than a few hairs bound together, applying the lacquer in strokes so light they barely disturb the surface beneath. The motion is almost like calligraphy, the brush dancing across the armour in patterns that follow its curves and contours. When he's finished, the chest plate gleams wetly in the morning light, looking like it's been carved from black glass. Now comes the hardest part of the entire process, leaving it alone. The final layer needs to cure completely, undisturbed for at least a full day, maybe 2. No touching it, no moving it, no doing anything that might mar the surface before it hardens. This is where impatience can ruin days of work. Jiro has seen young armourers get so excited about finishing a piece that they handle it too soon and leave fingerprints in the lacquer that are then permanent. He's done it himself, years ago when he was still learning. The memory of that mistake still makes him wince a little, so he covers the chest plate carefully, places it on a high shelf where nothing can disturb it, and turns his full attention to finishing the helmet. The neck guard lacquering is tedious because it involves dozens of small plates, each one needing multiple layers, each one having to be positioned carefully while the lacquer is applied. Jiro works on a few plates at a time, letting each batch cure before moving on to the next. It's slow going, but there's no way to speed it up without compromising quality, so he settles into the rhythm of it, accepting that this is just going to take as long as it takes. His mind wanders while he works. He thinks about Hiroaki, wonders if the samurai is getting anxious about getting his armor back. Probably not. Warriors understand that good work takes time. They'd rather wait longer and have armor they can trust than get it back quickly and have it fail in the next battle. On the afternoon of the 8th day, a different samurai arrives at the workshop. Not Hiroaki, someone else. This one is older, maybe 50, with grey streaking through his top knot and scars visible on his hands and forearms. He's dressed simply for someone of his rank, travelling clothes that have been worn and mended and worn again. He bows politely at the threshold and Jiro bows back, wondering what this is about. You don't often get samurai visiting in person unless there's a problem or a rush job, or both. Master Jiro, the samurai says, his voice rough like he spent too many nights sleeping in the cold. My name is Matsuda. I was told you're the best armourer within 2 days' ride. I don't know about best, Jiro says honestly, but I've been doing this a long time. What can I help you with? Matsuda reaches into a cloth bag he's carrying and pulls out a piece of armour that makes Jiro's stomach sink a little. It's a kote, an armoured sleeve that protects the arm from shoulder to hand, or it was an armoured sleeve. Now it's barely holding together. The fabric is torn in multiple places. Several of the metal plates that protect the forearm are missing entirely. The chainmail sections that cover the joints are so rusted and damaged that they look like brown lace instead of metal. This isn't battle damage. This is neglect. This is what happens when armour gets stored improperly and forgotten about for years. I know it's in poor condition, Matsuda says quietly. It belonged to my father. I haven't worn it in probably 15 years. But there's a campaign coming and I need to outfit myself properly. He pauses, looking at the ruined kote with an expression that's hard to read. Can you repair it, or is it beyond saving? Jiro takes the kote and examines it carefully, turning it over in his hands, assessing the damage. The fabric can be replaced. The missing plates can be fabricated or sourced from old armour in his salvage collection. The chainmail is the real problem. Repairing severely rusted chainmail is almost more work than making new chainmail from scratch, and making chainmail is miserable, tedious work that takes forever and destroys your hands. But it's possible. Everything is possible if you're willing to put in enough time and effort. I can repair it, Jiro says finally, but I need to be honest with you. It's going to take at least 2 weeks, maybe 3, and it's going to be expensive. The chainmail alone is days of work. Matsuda nods slowly, like he expected this answer. I understand. What about cost? Jiro names a price that's fair for the amount of work involved, but probably more than Matsuda wants to hear. The samurai's face doesn't change expression, but there's a slight tightness around his eyes that suggests the number is painful. He's quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he nods again. That's acceptable, Matsuda says, though his voice suggests it's not really acceptable so much as necessary. When would you need payment? Half now, half when it's finished, Jiro says. This is his standard arrangement. It protects both parties. The customer is committed so they won't abandon the piece halfway through, and Jiro gets enough up front to cover materials. And I need to be clear about the timeline. I have 2 other pieces ahead of yours. The earliest I could start on this is probably 10 days from now. Matsuda considers this, then reaches into a different bag and counts out coins for the deposit. His hands are scarred but steady, the hands of someone who's spent decades holding weapons. That's fine. I won't need it for at least a month. Take the time to do it properly. This armour, he pauses, looking at the kote again. It matters to me that it's done right. My father wore this in 7 campaigns. He survived all of them. I'd like to think that's partially because his armour was well made and well maintained, until I let it fall into disrepair. There's something in the way he says this that makes Jiro understand this isn't really about the armour at all, or not just about the armour. This is about guilt, about neglecting something that connected him to his father, about trying to repair that connection along with the physical object. Jiro has seen this before. Armour carries weight beyond its actual weight. It carries memory and obligation and the ghosts of everyone who wore it before. "I'll take good care of it," Jiro says quietly. "And when you get it back, it'll be ready to keep you safe for another 7 campaigns. Or more." Matsuda bows deeply, more deeply than he needs to, and Jiro bows back. Then the samurai leaves, walking back down the path toward the main road, and Jiro is left standing in his workshop holding a kote that's going to haunt his dreams for the next few weeks. He sets it carefully on a shelf next to the helmet, mentally adding it to his growing list of projects. 3 pieces now, the chest plate nearly finished, the helmet maybe halfway done, and now this sleeve that needs basically a complete reconstruction. He looks at the 3 pieces, the pile of work represented by metal and leather and silk, and feels that familiar weight settle onto his shoulders again. This is his life. This is what he does. He takes broken things that protect lives and makes them whole again, one painstaking layer at a time, one stitch at a time, one piece at a time. It's not glorious work. It's not the kind of thing that gets remembered or celebrated, but it matters. When Hiroaki walks into his next battle wearing that chest plate, when the unnamed warrior deflects a blow with that helmet, when Matsuda raises his arm to block a strike and the kote holds together, Jiro's work matters in the most fundamental way work can matter. He goes to his water bucket and washes his hands, carefully, methodically. The blister on his palm has finally healed over, just a slightly shinier patch of skin now. New calluses are forming where the old ones wore through. His hands are becoming more themselves with each passing year, accumulating the physical record of every piece of armour he's touched, every tool he's held, every burn and cut and hour of repetitive motion. These are Armourer's hands. They don't belong to anyone else but him. They're his tools and his burden and his pride, all at once. On the 10th day, Jiro decides Hiroaki's chest plate is finished. The final layer of lacquer has cured completely, the surface hard enough to tap with a fingernail without leaving a mark. He examines it in the morning light, turning it slowly, checking every angle for imperfections. There are a few tiny dust specks trapped in the lacquer, inevitable when you're working in a workshop instead of a sterile room, but they're minor enough that you'd have to be looking for them to notice. The overall finish is excellent. Deep black, smooth, with a subtle luster that makes the armour look both beautiful and serious. It looks like armour that will do its job. He begins the final assembly, reattaching all the various straps and ties that hold the chest plate to the rest of the armour. These need to be checked for wear too, replaced if they're frayed or weak. He finds 2 leather straps that are borderline, close enough to failing that they wouldn't survive another campaign. He cuts new straps from his leather stock, measures them precisely, punches holes for the rivets, and attaches them with the same care he brings to everything else. A strap breaking in the middle of battle could mean the chest plate shifts or falls away entirely, leaving the wearer exposed, so the straps get the same attention as the scales and the lacquer and everything else. The entire process of checking and replacing and reattaching takes most of the morning. By midday the chest plate is complete, fully repaired, ready to return to service. Jiro sets it on a clean cloth and stands back to look at it. There's a satisfaction in seeing a finished piece, something that was broken and is now whole. It's not the dramatic satisfaction of creating something new from nothing. It's quieter than that. It's the satisfaction of maintenance, of preservation, of keeping something valuable in the world a little longer. In a culture where everything eventually breaks and nothing lasts forever, the act of repair is a small rebellion against entropy. He wraps the chest plate carefully in cloth, preparing it for Hiroaki to collect. Then he writes a brief message on a small piece of paper, just a note saying the armour is ready, and gives it to a neighbourhood boy who does occasional errands for a few coins. The boy runs off toward Hiroaki's family compound, probably excited to have an excuse to go somewhere important, and Jiro returns to the workshop to focus on the helmet. With the chest plate finished, he can give the helmet his full attention without feeling like he's neglecting something else. The neck guard lacquering is finally complete. All the individual plates are coated, cured, and ready to be reassembled. Jiro begins lacing them back together with fresh silk cord, recreating the pattern that allows them to flex and overlap while still providing protection. It's finicky work because the plates are small and the holes are tiny and his fingers are not getting any more nimble with age. But muscle memory carries him through. His hands know this pattern so deeply that he could probably do it in his sleep. Over and under, through and around, pulling each cord taut before moving to the next. The afternoon stretches out warm and quiet. The cicadas are in full voice outside, creating that wall of sound that somehow makes the silence inside the workshop feel deeper by contrast. Jiro works steadily, methodically, losing himself in the rhythm of the lacing. There's something meditative about repetitive, skilled work, the way it quiets the chattering parts of your mind and lets you exist entirely in the present moment. No worrying about tomorrow's work, no dwelling on yesterday's mistakes. Just this cord, this plate, this knot, right now. He's nearly finished with the neck guard when he hears footsteps approaching. He looks up to see Hiroaki standing in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun. The samurai looks better than the last time Jiro saw him, less exhausted. The bruise on his ribs has presumably healed or at least stopped being actively painful. He bows politely and Jiro sets down his work to bow back. "I got your message," Hiroaki says. "The armor is ready?" "It is," Jiro confirms. He walks over to where the chest plate is wrapped and carefully unwraps it, holding it up so Hiroaki can see. The samurai steps closer, his eyes moving over the armor with the focused attention of someone who knows exactly what he's looking at. His fingers trace the scales, testing the cords, checking the places where the dents used to be. He examines the lacquer finish in the light, turning the chest plate to see how the surface reflects. "This is excellent work," Hiroaki says quietly. "Better than I expected, honestly. I thought the dent in the shoulder would still be visible." "It's there if you know where to look," Jiro admits. "But it won't affect the armor's function. The scale is solid, the lacquer is sound. It'll protect you as well as it did before." Hiroaki nods, still examining the armor. There's something in his expression that Jiro recognizes, a kind of relief mixed with renewed confidence. This armor has kept him alive multiple times. Having it back in good condition probably makes the next battle feel slightly less terrifying. Only slightly, because battles are objectively terrifying regardless of how good your armor is. But armor is one of the few things a warrior can control. You can't control whether you'll encounter a skilled opponent or a lucky spear thrust, but you can control whether your equipment is properly maintained. "What do I owe you?" Hiroaki asks, reaching for the coin pouch at his belt. They settle the payment, Hiroaki counting out coins while Jiro wraps the chest plate back up for transport. The amount is fair, probably less than Jiro could charge given the quality of the work, but he's never been interested in gouging people. He charges enough to live comfortably and maintain his workshop. That's sufficient. Getting wealthy off armor repair seems somehow wrong, like profiting too directly from other people's fear and violence. Hiroaki tucks the wrapped armor under his arm and hesitates at the door, like he wants to say something else. Jiro waits. Sometimes warriors want to talk after they get their armor back. Sometimes they just want to leave. You learn to read the difference and respond accordingly. "My father used to tell me," Hiroaki says slowly, "that an armorer's work is a form of compassion, that you spend your days trying to prevent suffering even though you never see the moments when your work succeeds, only when it fails." Jiro considers this. "Your father was a wise man." "He was," Hiroaki agrees. "He died in battle when I was 16. His armor failed. Or he was unlucky, or both. I've never been entirely sure." He's quiet for a moment, looking at the wrapped chest plate in his arms. "I think about that sometimes when I'm fighting. How someone like you spent hours, days maybe, working on his armor, trying to keep him alive, and it wasn't enough." "It's usually enough," Jiro says quietly. "Most warriors die because they're overwhelmed, or outmaneuvered, or just unlucky, not because their armor failed them. But yes, sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes the best armor in the world can't stop what's coming." Does that bother you? Knowing that no matter how good your work is, the person wearing it might die anyway? Jiro thinks about how to answer this honestly. "Yes," he finally says. "But if I let it stop me from working, that would be worse. At least this way I'm doing something. I'm increasing the chances even if I can't guarantee the outcome. That has to be enough." Hiroaki nods slowly, like this answer satisfies something he needed to hear. He bows again, deeper this time, with genuine respect. "Thank you, Master Jiro, for the work and for the conversation." "Take care of that armor," Jiro says, "and take care of yourself. Good equipment only helps if the person using it is smart enough to not do anything unnecessarily stupid." That gets a small smile from Hiroaki. "I'll try to remember that the next time someone's trying to put a spear through my chest." Then he's gone, walking back down the path, carrying armor that Jiro spent more than a week repairing. And Jiro is alone in his workshop again, surrounded by the pieces that still need work, the helmet and the kote, and whatever else will inevitably arrive in the next few days because armor is always breaking, and there's always more work to be done. He returns to the helmet, to the neck guard he was lacing when Hiroaki arrived. The conversation with the samurai sits in his mind as he works, turning over Hiroaki's question about whether it bothers him that his work might not be enough. Of course it bothers him, but you can't dwell on that. You can't let the uncertainty paralyze you into inaction. You just do the best work you can, as carefully and thoroughly as possible, and then you let it go into the world and hope. That's all anyone can do really, in any profession. Do your best and hope it's enough. The neck guard lacing is finished by evening. The helmet is essentially complete now except for some minor polishing and a final inspection. Jiro holds it up, checking the interior padding, testing the flexibility of the neck guard, examining the bowl for any remaining imperfections. It's good work. Not perfect, but good. The warrior who wears this will be safer for it. Probably. Hopefully. That has to be enough. The next few days are spent on finishing details, polishing the helmet bowl until it gleams, cleaning and reattaching the metal fittings, fabricating a replacement for the decorative crest that was lost in battle. Jiro doesn't know what the original crest looked like, so he makes something simple and elegant. A stylized flower made from brass and lacquered wood. It's not traditional for this type of helmet, but it looks appropriate, like it belongs there. When he attaches it to the bowl with small rivets and wire, the helmet finally looks complete, like a piece of equipment that a warrior would be proud to wear. He sends word to the young messenger who originally brought the helmet, letting his lord know it's ready for collection. While he waits for that pickup, he begins the preliminary work on Matsuda's kote. The first step is stripping away all the damaged material and assessing what can be salvaged versus what needs to be replaced. It's worse than he initially thought. Very little of the original fabric is usable. Most of the metal plates are fine once he cleans off the surface rust, but several are so corroded they've lost structural integrity. And the chainmail is going to be a nightmare. Chainmail is made by linking hundreds or thousands of tiny metal rings together in a specific pattern, creating a flexible mesh that can stop cuts and blunts impacts. Each ring has to be individually riveted closed, which means hundreds or thousands of tiny rivets that each need to be hammered shut. It's monotonous work that destroys your fingertips and makes your eyes blur from focusing on tiny details for hours. Jiro hates making chainmail. Every armourer hates making chainmail. But it's necessary, so you do it anyway. He starts by cutting new rings from iron wire, coiling the wire around a metal rod, and then cutting along the coil to create dozens of individual rings. Each ring then needs to have its ends flattened slightly, and a tiny hole punched through the flattened portions. Then you link the rings together in the proper pattern, overlapping them so each ring passes through 4 others. Then you insert a tiny rivet through the holes in the ring ends and hammer it shut, closing the ring permanently. Then you do it again, and again, and again, hundreds of times, until your fingers are cramping and your eyes are watering and you're questioning every life choice that led you to become an armourer instead of literally anything else. But there's also something satisfying about chainmail once you get into the rhythm of it. The way the mesh gradually grows under your hands, expanding link by link into something functional and almost beautiful in its geometric precision. The soft chiming sound the rings make when they move against each other, the knowledge that this tedious work you're doing is creating something that will flex with the wearer's movements while still providing serious protection. Chainmail is brilliant technology, really. It's just deeply unpleasant to make. Jiro works on the chainmail in the evenings, after he's finished with other tasks that require better light and steadier hands. The repetitive nature of it is almost meditative once you accept that you're going to be doing this for days. Ring, rivet, hammer, link to the mesh. Ring, rivet, hammer, link to the mesh. His mind wanders while his hands work on autopilot. He thinks about all the armour that's passed through his workshop over the years. Hundreds of pieces, maybe thousands. Each one carrying a story he'll never fully know. Each repair a small intervention in someone's life, keeping them safe enough to have a future that might not have existed otherwise. The helmet gets collected 4 days after Hiroaki picked up his chest plate. A different young messenger arrives, bows politely, accepts the wrapped helmet, and leaves payment and a brief message of thanks from his lord. Jiro appreciates the thanks but doesn't need them particularly. The work is its own reward, or that's what he tells himself. The truth is probably more complicated. The thanks do matter. They're confirmation that the work is valued, that the hours of tedious effort translate into something meaningful for someone else. But he tries not to need external validation too much. That way lies disappointment, because most of the time armor gets returned without much fanfare. The warrior shows up, collects their equipment, pays, and leaves. That's normal, that's fine. With the helmet gone, Jiro can focus entirely on Matsuda's kote. The chainmail is progressing slowly but steadily. The new fabric is cut and ready to be assembled. The metal plates are cleaned and organized. He's fabricated replacements for the missing plates, hammering them out from sheet metal and shaping them to match the surviving originals as closely as possible. They're not perfect matches. The new metal is slightly different in color and texture from the old, but once everything is assembled and lacquered, the differences will be minimal. And more importantly, they'll function properly. The assembly of the kote is like putting together a complex puzzle where all the pieces have to move correctly in relation to each other. The fabric forms the base layer, wrapping around the arm from shoulder to hand. Then the metal plates attach to the fabric in overlapping rows, creating protection while allowing the joints to bend. The chainmail sections cover the elbow and wrist, the places where solid plates would restrict movement too much. Everything has to be positioned precisely, or the wearer won't be able to move their arm properly, which would make the kote worse than useless. Jiro works slowly, testing and adjusting each component before securing it permanently. He uses himself as a rough-fitting model, sliding the partially assembled kote onto his own arm, and moving through basic motions, raising the arm overhead, bending at the elbow, flexing the wrist, checking that nothing pinches or binds or restricts movement unnaturally. It's not a perfect test because his arm isn't the same size and shape as Matsuda's, but it gives him a baseline. If it moves reasonably well on him, it should move well on its intended wearer. The work stretches across 2 weeks, just as he predicted. 2 weeks of cutting fabric and hammering metal and making endless rings of chainmail and stitching everything together with the kind of patience that would be impossible if you thought too much about how long everything was taking. But you don't think about the time. You think about the next stitch, the next rivet, the next link in the chain. You break the overwhelming task down into manageable pieces and work through them one at a time until suddenly you're done, and you're not sure exactly when you cross the line from incomplete to finished. On a humid afternoon 3 weeks after Matsuda first brought the kote to him, Jiro sets down his tools and looks at the completed piece. It's spread out on his workbench, all the components assembled and secured, the lacquer finished and cured, the chainmail linked and riveted closed. It looks good. Better than good, actually. The repairs are so thorough that you'd have to look very carefully to see that this is old armor that's been reconstructed rather than new armor that's been aged. He slides it onto his own arm one more time, testing the movement, checking that everything flexes and bends the way it should. Satisfied, he removes it and wraps it carefully in clean cloth. Matsuda arrives the next morning to collect it. The samurai looks different than he did 3 weeks ago. Less burdened somehow, like something that was weighing on him has lifted. Maybe it's just anticipation of getting his father's armor back. Maybe it's something else. Jiro unwraps the kote and presents it to him, watching Matsuda's face as the samurai examines the repair work. There's a moment where Matsuda just holds the kote, not inspecting it but just feeling the weight of it, the texture of the fabric and metal. Then he looks up at Jiro with an expression that might be gratitude, or relief, or something more complicated than either. "This is exceptional work," Matsuda says quietly. "I expected you to repair it. I didn't expect you to restore it like this. It looks almost like it did when my father first had it made." "That was the goal," Jiro says simply, "to bring it back to a condition where it could serve you the way it served him." Matsuda nods slowly, still holding the kote like it's something precious. "My father told me once that armor has memory, that it remembers the warrior who wore it and tries to keep their descendants safe too. I always thought that was sentiment talking. But holding this now, after you've put so much work into restoring it," he trails off, looking down at the kote. "Maybe he was right. Maybe there is memory in metal and silk and leather. Maybe your work puts that memory back in place." Jiro doesn't know what to say to that. It's more poetic than he's used to thinking about his work. But maybe there's something to it. Maybe the act of repair is a form of remembrance. Every careful stitch and hammered rivet and layer of lacquer is a way of honoring what the object meant and what it might mean again. He's not preserving the past exactly. He's making it possible for the past to participate in the future. That seems important somehow, even if he can't articulate exactly why. They settle the payment, Matsuda counting out the remaining coins with hands that are steadier than they were 3 weeks ago. Then the samurai bows deeply, tucks the wrapped kote under his arm and leaves. And Jiro is alone in his workshop again, surrounded by tools and materials and the quiet satisfaction of work completed. The afternoon light is slanting through the paper screens, turning everything warm and golden. The cicadas are singing their endless song outside. There's probably more armor that will arrive soon, more damage to assess, more repairs to plan. There's always more work. But right now, in this moment, there's just the stillness of a workshop at rest and the knowledge that he's done what he does. He's taken broken things and made them whole. He's given warriors a better chance at survival. He's preserved connections between past and present, between fathers and sons, between intention and outcome. He stands in the doorway looking out at the late afternoon, feeling the breeze move across his face, listening to the sounds of the world going about its business. His hands ache the way they always do, his back is stiff, his knees protest when he shifts his weight. But these are familiar aches, these are the price of meaningful work. And standing here, in this moment of completion before the next task begins, Jiro allows himself to feel satisfied. Not proud exactly, because pride seems like the wrong emotion for work that's fundamentally about service. But satisfied. Yes, the armor is whole, the warriors are safer, the work continues, and for now, for this quiet golden afternoon, that's enough. The workshop grows quieter as evening settles over everything like a soft cloth being draped across the world, and somewhere in the distance temple bells are marking time in that ancient, patient way they've marked time for centuries, reminding everyone that moments pass and days end, and even the most difficult work eventually gives way to rest. The tools on Jiro's workbench catch the last of the light, gleaming faintly, each one shaped by years of use into something that fits his hand perfectly, extensions of intention and skill that have repaired more armor than he could ever count. Outside, the cicadas are winding down their daily chorus, their voices growing softer and more intermittent as darkness deepens and the cooler night air begins to settle into the courtyard, bringing with it the scent of earth and growing things and the promise of sleep. There's something deeply peaceful about a workshop at the end of a day of good work, the kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done what you could with the time and materials and skill you possess, that somewhere out there warriors will wear the armor you've touched and be safer for it, that your hands have contributed something meaningful to the ongoing human project of trying to survive and protect what matters. Jiro stands in his doorway breathing the evening air, feeling his body begin to relax after hours of focus and precision, his mind finally slowing down enough to notice the beauty of the darkening sky and the first stars appearing overhead like tiny holes in fabric revealing light beyond. Eventually he'll go inside and eat something simple and lie down on his mat and sleep the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who spent their energy completely on worthwhile things. And tomorrow he'll wake and begin again, because that's what craftsmen do. They show up day after day and continue the work that needs continuing, repairing what's broken, preserving what matters, building whole things out of damaged pieces with nothing more than patience and skill, and the stubborn refusal to let entropy win without a fight. But that's tomorrow. Tonight the work is done, and the evening is beautiful, and somewhere out there armor is holding together and keeping people alive, and for now, in this moment, that's more than enough.